President Trump spoke this morning with President Moon Jae-in of South Korea, just 1 week after the surprise offer of a possible summit between Mr. Trump and North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un. Moon's foreign minister, Kang Kyung-hwa, is here in Washington to continue consultation with the Trump administration and Congress, a trip that almost didn't happen after Tuesday's firing of her counterpart, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Minister Kang and I spoke earlier today, and I began by asking her about President Trump's recent apparent threats to pull American troops from South Korea if the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, or KORUS FTA, is not improved in the United States' favor.
Well, I think the strength of the Korea-U.S. alliance is solid enough to not take comments related to trade as indicating something about the trip presence itself. And we are having a session of renegotiating the KORUS FTA. We very much hope and expect the result to be mutually beneficial and something that takes the FTA further in a way that benefits both countries.
Is your government prepared to make concessions on trade?
I think as deals go, there has to be concessions both ways.
The president also said in his remarks this week, he said, our allies care about themselves, they don't care about us. How do you read that?
I think every country thinks of their national interest in the first instance. We do, the U.S. does, all countries. I think that has to be read in that context and not taken at face value.
Well, let's turn to the proposed talks between President Trump and the leader of North Korea, Mr. Kim. How confident are you that those talks are going to take place? Any question that they'll happen?
Well, I think this is the result of our special envoy's direct discussion with Chairman Kim. So I'm pretty confident. I think we're cautiously optimistic that the talks will happen and that this will be a breakthrough for a peaceful resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue.
So what conditions have to be met, in your view, before these talks can take place on both sides?
I think very much the conditions that the U.S. has so far emphasized. That is, the North Korean leader has to indicate his commitment to denuclearization has been met. That was one of the key points that came out of the special envoys meeting and then conveyed to President Trump. The other was that they need to stop the provocations, and again, clearly stated by the leader himself, no more provocation as long as the dialogue continues. So I think the basic condition that we have been flagging, the U.S. has been flagging, has basically been met.
Could there be new sanctions imposed on North Korea before any talks take place?
Well, I think the international community together has been implementing the Security Council sanctions, and that certainly has been one of the factors that has led Mr. Kim to come out and start engaging. The Security Council, so yes, if there are further provocations, there will be more sanctions, but Mr. Kim has, Chairman Kim has clearly stated that there will be no further provocation as long as the dialogues continue.
Does your government trust the leader of North Korea? I mean, the people who watch North Korea closely say it has violated every agreement it's entered into in recent history.
It's not a matter of trusting. It's a matter of approaching the opportunity presented with goodwill, and we have. My president has been from the very beginning consistent and persistent in his message about North Korea, and that message has been North Korea's missiles nuclear program will never be accepted, but we want to engage to find a way towards a peaceful resolution. This is a much better situation, I think we all agree, than we found ourselves mid last year or even at the end of last year.
You mentioned the sanctions imposed on the North. Why do you think their leader, Kim Jong-un, wants this meeting? I mean, after all the effort, all the energy, resources they've poured into building up their nuclear weapons program that can strike the United States, certainly strike countries in the region. Why does he want this meeting?
The sanctions and the solidarity of the international community behind the sanctions are, by all accounts, having an effect. The chairman has promised two things to his people. One is the nuclear program, and one is economic development, improvement of livelihoods. And this was a part clearly stated in his New Year message. And to make progress on the second track, he cannot deliver this under the heavy sanctions regime. So he would understand that he needs to work with the international community, in the first instance, the United States, to ease the sanctions regime. And that's not going to happen unless and until unless he takes significant steps on the denuclearization track.
Do you have a goal? Does your government have a goal in mind? Should the U.S. have a goal in mind of what that denuclearization looks like? I mean, how far does it have to go for there to be an agreement?
Well, we are very clear in our stated goal of complete denuclearization of North Korea. And it will take a long while because the program is very advanced. So from a very well-advanced program to complete denuclearization, obviously, will take a long time. And we're prepared for the long haul, but we approach this with clear eyes and with nerves of steel, but with a clear goal in mind.
What concession should South Korea and the U.S. be prepared to make for there to be an agreement? And could it include removing or reducing the number of U.S. troops in South Korea?
I think the issue of the U.S. presence in South Korea is very much an issue that needs to be discussed, an issue for the alliance. And I don't think that we should even think about any concessions along those lines. It will not be an issue that we would be readily discuss at the table with North Korea.
Your president is going to meet with Leader Kim next month, and this is in advance of any meeting with President Trump. There are those who look at all of this and say South Korea and the United States are conferring a level of credibility and respect on the North Korean regime that it has not earned, that it doesn't deserve. How do you answer that?
It's a regime still that we need to deal with. It poses a grave security threat to Korea, to the whole world, and you can only deal with this threat by engaging with it. We're absolutely clear that a military solution is not an option. We are a country that have experienced the most destructive war in a lifespan that my father's generations can remember. So there cannot be another war on the Korean Peninsula. This requires a peaceful solution, and to have a peaceful solution, you have to deal with them. You have to negotiate.
And how much are you concerned about the fact that you are dealing with the U.S. administration that's undergoing a lot of change at the top? How much harder does that make it to work with the U.S. on this very sensitive issue?
Well, it's people, but it's also institutions, which is why, despite the fact of the change at the top of the State Department, I've still decided to come, because it's certainly with people you develop a certain camaraderie after a while, but that's comes with part of the job. And I think that's what professional diplomacy requires.
I asked you earlier if your government trusts Kim Jong-un. Do you trust President Trump?
I have confidence in his ability to deliver on his strong desire to come to grips with this issue of the North Korean nuclear and missile threat.
Well, Foreign Minister Kang, we thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you, Judy.